Hey guys, today I have a high scaled score question for you for the CCRN exam. This is not a question that you would expect to see on the PCCN exam. Certainly though, it is fair game for CCRN candidates. So let's take a look. A patient post-anterior septal MI develops new onset of a holosystolic murmur and signs and symptoms of cardiogenic shock. When the O2 saturation is measured from the proximal port of the pulmonary artery catheter, it is 70%, while the saturation at the distal port is 85%. The most likely cause of this is, well, it could be A, ruptured papillary muscle, B, torn chordae tendineae, C, ventricular septal rupture, or D, an extension of the patient's anteroseptal MI. So let's just stop and think for a moment. Okay, so if we're looking at the right side of the heart, we know that if we would take a blood sample from the right atrium, it's venous blood, like no newsflash here, right? Venous blood has an average saturation right around 75%, give or take. But then if you were to look at oxygen saturation at the distal port of the pulmonary artery catheter, you should probably get approximately the same value, should you not? Because blood goes from what? Right atrium into right ventricle, out into the pulmonary circuit before it gets its oxygenation. So how weird is that we have jumped from a 70% SAT to an 85% SAT? That is what's known as a step up in oxygenation. Like, where's that coming from? I want you to think about this for a moment and tell me what your answer might be. Is it papillary muscle rupture, torn chordae tendineae, ventricular septal rupture, or extension of an anterior septal MI? Take a moment. Well, I'm sure you've said it, and that is, how would blood get, oxygenated blood, get from the left side of the heart back over to the right? There must be a hole somewhere, a rupture somewhere, right? For blood to go from left to right. That's a very unnatural movement when we're talking about blood flow through the heart. So I'm sure you all came in for a landing on ventricular septal rupture. Because with ventricular septal rupture, we know that when there's a hole in the septum, we get that oxygenated blood that is pretty much going across that hole in the septum from left to right. That's why it is in the right atrium, we got a pretty, normal venous saturation of 70-ish%, but yet at the pulmonary artery catheter tip, which is the distal port, we find it to really have quite a step up in oxygenation into the mid-80s. So that is oxygenated blood shifting from left to right across a hole in the septum. So ventricular septal rupture would be your answer here. Both ruptured papillary muscle and torn chordae tendineae, both of those things would produce a holosystolic murmur, but they would also, in the description, you would read that they produce a gigantic V wave in the pulmonary artery occlusive pressure tracing. Plus that, with papillary muscle rupture or torn chordae tendineae, they are attached to the papillary muscle, we would not see that step up in oxygenation. Not at all, even though in both cases, we would hear a holosystolic murmur. Extension of an anterior septal MI, well, that's not going to do it either. And the reason why that's not going to do it is because there is not going to be that change in saturation. There might be all other kinds of cardiogenic shock type signs with an extension of an anterior septal MI, but you wouldn't see that step up in oxygenation between the right atrial port and the pulmonary artery port. So that's all I have for today. You guys have a wonderful day, and I'll see you again tomorrow. Bye-bye.